To start things off, we're going to be learning about the fundamental ways in which we can navigate around 3D space. Here we have our 3D viewport, which allows us to move in the X, Y and Z dimensions. Unlike the traditional 2D interface, we can't just move our mouse around and expect to move throughout our viewport. So we're going to need to go one step further when it comes to 3D viewport navigation. The simplest way of moving around your scene is to orbit around a point of reference, which in this case is going to be the center of the Blender grid where these red and green lines meet. To orbit, hold down the middle mouse button on your 3-button mouse, and then move your mouse around. You will now be able to orbit around your point of reference. Again, this is going to be the very center of your scene. The second method of navigating in 3D space is to zoom in and out of your point of reference. We can do this by scrolling up on the scroll wheel to zoom in and scrolling down on the scroll wheel to zoom out. If we hold down the Control key, then hold down the middle mouse button and move up, we can initiate what is known as a dolly zoom, which is just another form of zooming. If we move down with our mouse, we can zoom out. So we have two methods of zooming here, using the scroll wheel and also using the Control key and the middle mouse button. The third method is to pan or move our view. This will move our view across in left, right, up and down directions, but will not change the angle of the view. To do this, hold down the Shift key on your keyboard, then hold down the middle mouse button. Now move your mouse around and the view will move, but in 2 dimensions rather than 3, so we're always looking at our scene from the same angle. Note that if we pan our view and then orbit or zoom, you will notice that we have changed the point of reference, which is always going to be at the center of our viewport. But because we panned our view, the center is no longer where the red and green lines meet. So how do you reset your view? Well, one method of resetting your view is to select an object located at the center of your scene, go to View, and then choose the Frame Selected option. You can also use the period key on the number pad if you have a number pad to use. So I'm going to left click on Frame Selected and it zooms in on my cube object. This now means that the cube is my point of reference, so I can orbit around it, zoom in and out, etc. In addition to using the middle mouse button to orbit, pan and zoom, we also have access to some additional options at the side of the 3D viewport, and these can be useful if you don't have a 3-button mouse. For example, we have the interactive axis, so I can left click with my mouse within this axis and then move my mouse around. This allows me to orbit my view without using the middle mouse button, which is not present on a touchpad for laptops. We also here have access to the X, Y and Z options. If I left click on any of these, it will take me to the right orthographic view for the X axis, the back orthographic view for the Y axis, and top orthographic view for my Z axis. But we can also reverse these. So if I go back to my Y axis, it's currently set to back orthographic, but then if I select Y again, it will switch to the front view. Below that, we have a couple of additional buttons here. So the first of these is the zoom in and out button. We can just left click and drag to zoom in and out. Again, no reason to use the scroll wheel or the control button on our keyboard. And we also have the ability to move our view with this option directly underneath. Again, left click and begin moving your cursor or your touchpad to move the view. Now, sometimes when navigating, you may see what you've just seen on my screen, where the view kind of jumps away. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to zoom out just to relocate where my cube is. And then I'm going to go back to view and choose frame selected to reset my view on my cube. So these are the fundamental ways in which we can navigate in Blender. But before we move on, I'm going to demonstrate the final two options. So the first option here at the side is the ability to toggle the camera view. Simply left click and the 3D viewport will now preview what your camera object can see. Anything within this border is going to be rendered when we go to render our images or animations. We can left click again on this toggle option to come out of our camera's view. The final button switches from perspective to orthographic views and vice versa. So at the moment we're in perspective view. If I left click on this option, we're going to go into orthographic view. The only difference between perspective and orthographic is that perspective view has depth. So if you were to move your object further away, it would get smaller and smaller in perspective view. But in orthographic view, it would remain the same size on your monitor.